Good morning. Today we are going to be studying chapter 5 of Tanya. Chapter 5 kind of like picks up from where we concluded last week in chapter 4. And in some ways it can look like it's a bit of a tangent. It's like kind of like a bit of the side subject. It doesn't necessarily continue in the exact narrative of the discussion of the two souls and so on. But it's a very important fundamental principle which helps us have a better perspective, a better understanding of something that's very important, fundamental in general, and of course it will also add to the general discussion overall. So I'm just giving this intro or sharing this little disclaimer before we start in case you wonder wait, how did this land over here? So you able to appreciate where the context, where it's coming from. So last week, we discussed about the garments of the soul. We introduced the concept of the garments, thought, speech, and action. And in the context of the godly soul, we explained that the garments represent thought, speech, and action that's associated with holiness, with godliness, with spiritual things. And primarily, the study of Torah and the observance of mitzvot. And we went into a deeper discussion in understanding the significance of the impact that a mitzvah has both in general and then also in our own soul and our own self. The concept of how the mitzvah is a connector. It's something that binds us, that connects us with God. We explained the idea of the organs and the sinews. You have the 248 to-do mitzvot, the positive commands, which are channels to be able to pump forward or to allow, to facilitate for the divine light, the divine energy, good morning, to shine through us. And then we explained that 365 don't do's, prohibitions, those are the sinews that protect the flow of blood, that it should be clear, it shouldn't become contaminated, it shouldn't become negatively impacted or influenced in any way. So that was pretty much a deeper understanding of the significance of a mitzvah. Today, we're going to talk about one specific mitzvah, which oftentimes people don't necessarily connect it to a mitzvah, but it is a mitzvah, which is the study of Torah. So study of Torah, we say, okay, there's the Torah and there's the mitzvah. But the truth is that Torah is also a mitzvah. The study of Torah is a mitzvah. And today we're going to focus on that mitzvah specifically. And we're going to see how, although all the mitzvot, we discussed last week, have that benefit and that impact that just briefly touched upon right now, the mitzvah of the study of Torah specifically has an additional element to it, which is very, very unique. And the effect of it is very powerful and transformative. Okay, so first, let's understand what exactly is the purpose or the significance of study of Torah. So if you ask somebody, why should I study Torah? So some people will tell you, because you need to know what to do. Right? If you don't study, you don't know. Why do you study anything? What's the purpose of study, huh?
To learn.
To learn what? What does it mean to learn?
To be able to do something new.
To be able to do something new, right? Why do you go to college? To study. To do what? What's the goal? Like if somebody says, I'm just going to college just to study.
To know what to do, yeah.
To get a degree, there's an end goal, right? You don't,
Yeah.
I'm just going to study because I want to stimulate my mind. Really?
No.
That's ridiculous. Just go to a library. Why? What's the point? So anytime a person engages in study, there's a purpose. If you're going to see a title for a class, why do you choose to go or not to go? What's one of the driving factors, other than, of course, the social interactions that come along with it? What's one of the driving factors that are going to determine whether or not you want to attend this class? Does the title seem relevant to me? Do I need this? Is this important in my life? I'm going to tell you a class about, I don't know, the significance of bacteria and some whatever. So Larry may show up. Nobody else cares, right? He's a physicist, so... for many of us, who cares? But if it's something that's like right up your alley, if you're trying to figure out, how to learn how to use a certain computer program, and then you see there's a class being offered how to use this program. Oh my God, sign me up! I need to know. I'd say I got to do it. So typically, when we think of study, we associate that with information that's going to empower us to be able to know how to behave. So oftentimes, people turn to Torah or associate Torah because Torah is information, it's knowledge, in the same way. What is in the Torah for me would be information that can benefit my life. So if I think that a certain part of Torah is relevant to that, then I say, okay, I'm interested. And if not, whatever. It doesn't really talk to me. It's not up my alley. Why do I need that exactly? So for this purpose, it's important that we reframe the entire perspective of how we approach intellectually the concept of Torah study. Torah study has a very different idea, contrary or different than any other form of intellectual engagement that you may approach or pursue in any other area of your life. And that is that let's think about the origin of the Torah, the information, the wisdom that's in the Torah. Where does that come from? God. Beautiful, right? It's God's wisdom. You know the story with a guy who was selling on Amazon Bibles signed by the author?
That's nice.
I'll take a couple.
Okay.
How did you
Is
prove
that for real?
authenticity?
No, I'm kidding.
I hope not.
You never know. Hey, you never know.
They do.
People have all sorts of ideas out there. Try it until you get exposed, right?
Were they stone tablets or paper?
So if the wisdom of Torah comes from God, that means that when we study that information, let's think of the physical process that's taking place. Our brain is processing data, it's processing knowledge, information, that knowledge somehow comes from God. It's God's wisdom. It's God's idea. So putting aside what content of information is in it, let's just think of the process. The process itself. You have wisdom from God, whatever that means. God doesn't have a physical image or physical reality in that sense, but God has ideas in some way, and He conveyed those ideas to us. And when our brain processes that data, there's something very incredible happening. The truth is that in most ways, this happens with any knowledge, with any wisdom that you study. If you're going to study a theory of Einstein, if you're going to study a mathematical equation, whatever it may be, that same concept technically happens in your brain at the same time. And that is that while you're processing the data, your brain is kind of like enwrapping or taking in that information into it. So the brain is absorbing all of that data into itself. Then, once the brain connects with it, what happens is that the data now kind of wraps the brain, meaning now the data owns the brain, meaning that the brain becomes influenced and affected by that information. So it's a double effect that's happening in that time. Now imagine if that data, if that information is God's wisdom. So what happened here right now is something incredible. And that is, in a certain sense, the most incredible thing that happens when we study Torah, more than anything else. That is, that at the moment we're studying the Torah and our brain connects and internalizes the ideas and the teachings of Torah, our brain absorbs God's wisdom within it, and then God's wisdom wraps around our brain. It kind of influences it. The connection that happens between our mind and God at that moment is beyond any other form of connection that we can have with God in any other way. Even the connection that we talked about last week through the mitzvot is very powerful. We explained it's like a garment that you wrap around you, and it's like you're hugging the king. Remember, we had that analogy. It's like you're embracing with God, but here, it's much deeper than an embrace. You didn't unite, you became one. Because your mind and God's wisdom completely melded into one entity, into one unit. And that is the most powerful aspect of Torah study. When it comes to that point, it doesn't matter what the topic of Torah that you studied is, because it makes no difference. As long as it's a part of Torah, which means it's God's wisdom, and you made the effort to understand it and comprehend it, you now have absorbed God's wisdom into your brain, and God's wisdom has now totally surrounded, totally captured your mind. Your mind became transformed by God's view, by God's intellect. That's powerful. That's amazing. And that is really the greatest effect of Torah study. For that, it doesn't matter what the topic. It doesn't matter what it is you study. If it's something I need for my life or not, that's all good. Of course, we need to study Torah because we need to know what to do. I need to study Torah because it's going to make me feel better. Fine, that's all good. But that's all like way beyond secondary to the primary impact that happens when we study Torah. And the way it's translated in Tanya is that if we want to compare now the effect of Torah study versus the observance of any other mitzvah in our connection with God, it can be understood by the difference between garments and food. Both garments and food are essential elements for a human being to be able to survive, to live. Garments provide us a shield, a shelter, warmth, whatever it may be, dignity, the all important elements that we need to be able to live healthy and properly. And food gives us the nourishment that we need. But what's the essential difference is that although garments are very, very important, and they need to be to size, meaning I can't necessarily wear somebody else's garment, it may not fit me, it may not help. If I wear something too small or too big, it could not only not benefit, it can hurt me. If you wear something too big, you could trip, you could fall, it can be in your way. If it's too small, you may not be covered properly for protection of, let's say, cold or whatever it may be. When it comes to food, it's not just something that is around me, but I ingest it. It goes within me, right? It becomes really absorbed within every aspect of my bloodstream, every part of the digestive process, and it goes through all the different organs of the body. And that's the difference, the way the Tanya explains of the mitzvah and the Torah. The mitzvah provides a connection to God like a garment. It's around us. The Torah is like food. When you study Torah, it's like you're ingesting God's knowledge. It's becoming part of your brain. It's becoming part of your mind, the way you understand things. Okay? Does that make sense? We're good? All right. Any comments on this before I move into another part of this idea?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
So how far can we take this? So when we learn something and remember it, there is a chemical change in our brain, right? So there is this studying of Torah, chemical change from it. But then if we study for 10 minutes a day, and all the other stuff we're watching TV, commercials, and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and all these other things, then there's, the brain has a certain amount of capacity and attention and stuff like that. So is there some specialness to the attachment that the Torah has that displaces or persists even when it gets filled with other things?
It's a great question. Phenomenal question. And so in one hand, the answer is, I think, that yes, the time that you study Torah you get that benefit. But when you're allowing your mind to connect and attach itself to other ideas, then you're unbalancing that opportunity. It doesn't delete the accomplishment that happened in the time, whatever you gave an example, 10 minutes, whatever it is that you spent studying Torah, that's effective. But true, the quantity of time does matter. And obviously the goal would be to constantly try to give yourself the more opportunities possible to be able to connect with Torah, to allow your mind to absorb those ideas. But then there's another element to it, which I think is perhaps something that you were trying to probe towards, which the Torah, because it's God's wisdom, it has a certain spiritual power that is greater than other forms of knowledge. So any form of knowledge or information, whatever it may be, you give an example of a TV commercial, or even if it's something more sophisticated than that, if it's I'm studying something in science or mathematics or whatever it may be, a political, political science or whatever it may be, doesn't matter what the military strategy, whatever it may be, intellectual process is finite. It's a humanly created concept. We may call it a certain truth, but it's not absolute. And the fact is that any human knowledge could always be refuted somehow. You can strongly prove one idea, and then there's a possibility that there could be another perspective that can refute it, and eventually that what seemed to be a truth can fall apart, right? Which is what happens in science all the time. Science is constantly evolving. There's certain principles and truths of science that were believed to be absolute, or this is the way it is 20 years ago, 50 years ago, and today we've gone beyond that. We realize that that's not how it is. There's new evidence, there's new perspective, there's new ideas, and so on. So there is a certain spiritual power to the fact that God's wisdom is God's, which means it's infinite, and ultimately it's absolute truth, meaning it can never change, you can never refute it. It's never something that could, never mind, we've evolved, we've gotten beyond that. And because of that power, it does have a deeper effect and a deeper impact on your mind and on your brain versus other ideas of information that you may take in. So it's not just about comparing the amount of time, that you give one versus the other. And if I only give 10 minutes a day to Torah and then, 23 hours and 50 minutes, whatever. Usually when we're sleeping, we're not necessarily intaking information. Hopefully you turn off your TV before you fall asleep. Whatever, we don't necessarily take in, but whatever amount of hours. It's not just about the amount of time, but there is a certain spiritual power and greatness to the study of Torah that it could influence the mind in a deeper way than everything else. In fact, there is a statement by our sages that says, "Hamaor sheba machzira lemutav," that if a person, for whatever reason, may have, gotten deep into inappropriateness in their mind, and they're trying to figure out how to be able to pull out. So it says the ma'or means the source of light. There's or, which is light, and then there's the ma'or. Ma'or is what brings the light. It's what's causing the light. So it says the ma'or, which is the origin of light in the Torah, will return the individual to good. Meaning the spiritual power of Torah is so great, it's so powerful that it can overcome many other layers of other information or other ideas that in quantity may be greater, but the quality of Torah could oftentimes overpower that. Now that shouldn't be used as a cop-out to say, okay, so just 10 minutes of Torah, and then, obviously we always want to increase as much as we can, but at the same time, we could look at this teaching to see it as a form of encouragement, not to think, only 10 minutes of Torah compared to my whole day, it's not worth it, so I may not bother. It's not worth the effort. No, whatever little bit of Torah is a very powerful dose, and it could really affect us in a very transformative way. Does that answer your question?
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So, but again, to push the analogy, this Torah, right? What exactly is Torah, right? So there was the tablets that Moses wrote on with the chisel, and or God, I don't know how it was, but right now we have paper, right? And 5 books of Moses, that's a lot of stones, but we have chapters from Isaiah and all these others, right? So what exactly is Torah? And before you answer, is it such a stretch that Tanya is in some sense, I don't know, an offshoot of Torah? And then if we were studying the Torah, in Hebrew, that's one thing. But what if we have to study it in English or Turkish or something? There's
AI.
Is it diluted? Is it changed? Does it lose its power? Is that even is it possible?
Your questions are so good, it almost makes me think that you read the chapter before. All right. So first of all, Torah is a lot more than the 2 stone tablets that Moshe received from God at Mount Sinai. Torah includes within it, generally, if you want to classify it, 2 categories. We have what's called Torah shebichtav, the written Torah. The written Torah is basically all the 24 books of the Tanakh. That's the 5 books of Moses, plus the other books of the prophets and the scriptures. All of that is part of what we call Torah shebichtav, the written Torah. And the reason why we call it the written Torah is because at the time that they were taught or given, it was immediately documented, written, and there's a perfect tradition of exactly all those words. It's never been changed or lost in any way through all the generations. Today, the archaeologists have discovered you have the Cairo Gniza, and you have all sorts of the Dead Sea Scrolls. You have so many things where they've found and they've traced back, and they see documents that were written really, thousands of years ago, and it's exactly how we have in our tradition. That's the written part of Torah. Then we have the aspect of Torah that's called Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah, the Torah that's been passed down from generation to generation, from parent to child, from teacher to student, orally. It's not something that was written down. Eventually, as the persecution of the Jewish people intensified, primarily during the time of the Roman persecution, the sages at the time decided that it was very important to record that information as well, because they realized that due to all the difficulties in the persecution, the Jewish people may lose all of that knowledge, all of that information, because they're not going to have the ability to devote the time and study that requires to give to memory all of that knowledge. So they decided to make a very bold change, so to speak, to the system of how the Torah was transmitted and recorded. And that began with what we know as the Mishnah, the Talmud, and you have many, many extensions of that.
Is that also the Parshanot?
So it includes all the commentaries, exactly. You have the Midrash, and you have the Kabbalah. All of that is part of what we call Torah Shebal Peh, the written Torah, the oral Torah, and it was all documented at different phases. Yes.
Who wrote it?
Who wrote that information?
No, the Torah Shebichtav.
Torah Shebichtav, so
Who
it was
wrote it?
written in parts. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the first 5 books.
Okay.
Before he passed away, he completed writing all the Torah, and it was not written on stone, just by the way. It was written on parchment. Only the tablets were on stone. Everything else was written on parchment. Parchment they had. They didn't have paper, but they had parchment. So the Torah scrolls were written. In fact, just to connect your 2 questions here, you asked about language. So the Torah actually states that Moshe translated the Torah in all the languages before he passed away. So the idea of Torah being accessible in other languages is something that goes back all the way to the origin, the concept, and we can touch upon that a little bit more. I just want to kind of follow in order the questions here. And then the rest of the Torah Shebichtav was written by various different of the Nevi'im, of the prophets at the time. So like Yehoshua wrote the book of Yehoshua, the book of Shoftim was written by some of the judges. I don't remember exactly which ones. You had the kings, you had Shlomo and David and the prophets.
Who decided which one will get in, like, to collect them, and which one, like?
So at that time, the authority of the Jewish people was commanded by what we call Nevi'im, by prophets. And God communicated to the prophets, and whatever they said, this is how we're going to do it, this is how it was recorded. In fact, the last book that kind of was included in the Torah Shebal Peh, the Torah Shebichtav, is the book of Esther. Because that was much, much later. It's already after the exile of the after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, and it's at the end of the Babylonian exile. The story of Purim happened right before, shortly, a few years before the exiles returned to rebuild the second Beit HaMikdash. And Esther begged from the sages at the time that they should include her story as part of the Tanakh. And it was a whole discussion. The sages all had to convene to discuss if it was going to be included, and it was accepted.
Why do we have separate scrolls for when Torah comes?
Because the 5 books is considered of a greater sanctity. And oftentimes when we talk about the Torah, we're referring to the 5 books, although the title Torah,
5 books.
Exactly. The scroll of Torah only has 5 books. And you're not supposed to write a scroll that has all 24. There are communities that have scrolls for the different prophets as well. It's not so common today. In many communities, they have these scrolls, and when they read the Haftorah that we read after the Torah reading is always from the prophets. And it's something that has to do with the story or the content of the Torah reading of that week. And some communities, they would use a scroll to read out of it, and that's why they had scrolls of the prophets as well. And the scroll of Esther is a scroll because it's similar.
Oh, so half Torah is always from the prophets.
Yeah.
And you see some synagogues that have multiple Torahs.
Yeah, you can have as many as you want. There's no limit. They're all the same.
Okay.
It's not like today we're using this one. Now we've moved on from that. We have a new one. No, they're all the same. It's just more scrolls.
So then why would they have multiple?
When do you decide
One would
which
have
one
multiple
to read today?
That's great. Now
You have a
we're
preference.
going into Gabaut, into the Torah, into the synagogue management. No, but that's a great question. Yes, I'll get to that. So
Doesn't matter.
why?
I don't know.
So why do you have many? The practical answer to that is that there are certain times when we read out of more than one Torah scroll, because there are certain times, like on a holiday or certain Shabbatot that are coincide with certain significant days, we will read of more than one portion. And the most appropriate way to do that is to not have to roll the Torah back and forth in the presence of the congregation. It's called tircha de tzibura. It means it's a what's the word? It's a inconvenience.
Yeah.
It's an inconvenience for the congregation. So the best way to do it is you have each Torah scroll already pre-prepared in the right spot. So if you have to read 2 sections, you take out 2 Torahs. If you read 3 sections, which is the most that it can ever be at once, you take out 3 Torahs. Some synagogues have more than 3. And the reason is because people want to donate a Torah. And they donate, so they donate another one. They don't need it. No synagogue needs more than 3 Torahs at the most.
Did you do Amidah 3 times if you take out all 3 Torahs?
If what?
If you do the Amidah 3 times?
No. The prayer is the same. You don't. It's just the Torah reading.
Because yesterday we did it twice.
Right, because one was for Mincha, and that was 2 different prayers we did.
Okay.
One was the Shacharit prayer, and then we snuck in a Mincha prayer. So we did it, and on Shabbat afternoon, the Mincha has a Torah reading as well. So that's why we did the Torah reading again. Yes. So to answer your question, doesn't matter which one. That will ultimately really be determined by the desires of the congregation. Sometimes there's a certain Torah that was donated for a certain reason or represents something, so they want to use it for some reason. Practically, if they're going to take out more than one Torah, then they just want to prepare the Torahs in advance where they're supposed to be. So you need to take out the one that is in the right place. Otherwise, you take out the other one, you're going to have to roll it, wind it.
And back to what we're talking about, studying it, does that include everything, like just knowing the stories and reading it versus deciphering what it means and then all that stuff?
So that ties in what we call the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral tradition, meaning the oral tradition is not removed. It's not like completely a new idea unrelated to the written tradition. Everything that's in the oral tradition of the Torah, everything that's in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, is directly tied back to the Torah Shebichtav, to the written Torah. Just let me clarify one thing that maybe didn't come through clearly. The oral Torah wasn't invented later on at some point by the sages or somebody else. Oh, I have an idea. Let's make that part of the oral Torah. The oral Torah was also given to Moses by God at the same time that the written Torah was given. All the information of the oral Torah, the principles of the information of the oral Torah were given to Moses at the same time as God gave him the written Torah. Except that God said, this you write, and this you teach orally. And that was passed down from generation to generation. Now, the novelty of the oral Torah is that it has information. There are certain things that were taught directly to Moses. And then there are principles. These principles is like a constitution, if you want to say. It's like a structure that allows for you to be able to further develop the Torah as needed for this, the time that you're in, that will follow the guidance, and because it's following that guidance, it's still part of the Torah. It's not a new entity. So, for example, let me give you an example. One of the biggest aspects of that is the information about the halakha, the law, the Torah law, the Jewish law, which is really what the Mishnah and the Talmud, and then the further generations of developing that halakha, that law. So, let's take any mitzvah that you want. You can choose any mitzvah. Here, call out. Choose a mitzvah. Tell me Saturday, Shabbat. Okay, perfect. So the Torah tells us very few limited words about what it means to observe Shabbat. We know it's one of the 10 commandments, right? It's one of the Aseret HaDibrot. It's from the top 10, if you want to call it. But what does it say? It says twice in the Torah, the 10 commandments are written twice. Once it says, remember the holy day of Shabbat and sanctify it. And one says, guard the holy day of Shabbat and sanctify it. And then there's a few more verses in each one of those times that describe a little bit about God created the world in 6 days, the seventh day he rested. Fine. Where do we get from that you shouldn't turn on a light switch? Where do we get from that you're not supposed to go to work? Where do we get from that you have to make kiddush? Where do we get all of these things? It doesn't say that. So how do we get that? So God told Moshe, let me tell you, when I say keep the Shabbat day, let me tell you what I mean. He explained to him. He told him all the laws. What does it mean to observe Shabbat? Now, he also taught him principles of how to further develop that. So Shabbat is a perfect example because in our reality, we understand as well that there's a lot of aspects of modern life that are new ideas that obviously Moshe wasn't talking about light switches, and he wasn't talking about driving cars, and certainly he wasn't talking about self-driving cars, right? So there's so many different things that as the times evolve that we have to be able to know how to apply those principles. And I don't want to disappoint you, but I'm not going to be able to go through all of that today, but I just want to explain one idea. So, for example, when the Torah says do not do work on Shabbat, God told Moses, let me explain you what that means. That means...
in the Torah, though?
No, it's in the oral Torah.
Okay, got it.
And it's not written inside. But he told him, my point is that it's not some sage that decided later on, I think work means writing, so don't write. No, God told Moses all of the principles, all the details of every mitzvah, exactly how it's to be performed. And then he gave him the further guiding principles. So then once you understand what the qualification of work is, based on what God told Moses, and you know all the principles of how to further develop or analyze the study of Torah, then when you have a new modern concept, you have a light switch, so you need to be able to understand, does this cause one of the aspects of work that God told Moses that work on Shabbat shouldn't be done, or not? So I'll tell you a story as an example. In one of the elements of modern technology that became a big, hot, disputed topic among many different sages at the time was the use of a microphone. In the, I would say probably in the 1940s and 1950s, it started to become very popular, the use of a microphone, and many synagogues wanted to use a microphone. It's very convenient. Imagine if you have a synagogue with hundreds or maybe even thousands of people, a microphone is a phenomenal facilitator, right? To be able to, everybody can hear, everybody can join in together, everyone can participate. You know, there was a huge synagogue in Alexandria in Egypt that was known for this, that there was a huge synagogue of thousands of people, and obviously then they didn't have a microphone if they wanted, so how did the people in the back know what's going on in the front? They had flags, that when the chazan would reach a certain point, they would wave the flag, and people in the back knew to respond amen. You know, they had to figure out systems. So imagine, a microphone is a phenomenal thing. And right when it started to become popular, a lot of different rabbis weren't sure, is it allowed to be used on Shabbat? Is it not? And in the beginning, there were multiple views and perspectives. Eventually, all the halachic authorities agreed that yes, it can't be used on Shabbat. But at the time, when it was still being very hotly debated, the story is told that somebody approached the Rebbe to ask the Rebbe about his view on it. And the Rebbe said the microphone cannot be used on Shabbat. And this fellow was trying to challenge the Rebbe, say, but this rabbi says you could, and that one says you can't. You know, so the Rebbe said like this. He said there are two different types of people that are giving opinions about the use of a microphone on Shabbat. There are certain opinions are coming from rabbis who are very, very well versed in the laws of the Torah and the laws of Shabbat, but they know nothing about the engineering of a microphone. Then there are those who understand how a microphone is engineered, but they know nothing about the laws of Shabbat. So, he says, I'm in a unique position. The Rebbe was an engineer. And he says, I am a unique position. I'm very well versed in the laws of Shabbat, and I understand the engineerings of a microphone, and I'm telling you that if you combine the two together, you cannot use it on Shabbat. It's a violation of Shabbat. Yes.
So between Abraham and Moshe, how did they, what was practiced? Because there was no written or oral Torah.
Great question. So, not to confuse anybody or make everybody freak out, but the information about the Torah was already known before God gave us the Torah. When God gave us the Torah, that wasn't a new information. It was already known before. The difference was that God commanded it upon us. Until then, you didn't have to do it. Abraham voluntarily chose to follow the ways of Hashem. Already Adam and Eve, God gave them the knowledge of the Torah. They didn't have the text like written down, because that was only written by Moses. But the information,
it was oral tradition, just like handed down.
The mitzvot, they already knew before.
Okay.
And then,
not the stories, right? It's not like Abraham, Adam was studying the story of Noah and the flood. They didn't happen yet. No, it's not.
I get that.
so you answered the question written and oral. So like what's been in my mind for months now, when we read the Siddur, like there's a section where goes over the ingredients of the incense that Aaron uses, and it says if you use honey instead of sap, you'll be struck down to your death or something.
Right.
But like that's the oral Torah giving the ingredients and the reasoning for this, or
so correct. So the written Torah doesn't say the actual ingredients of what they are, and in the oral Torah it writes them. But before the oral Torah was written, let's think, for example, right? Exactly the example you gave. The incense was something that was done already in the times of Moshe in the desert, right? They had the Mishkan, they had a tabernacle that traveled with them in the desert, and they offered incense in the Mishkan. So which ingredients they offer? Those exact 11 ingredients that you read about in the Siddur. That's what they offered. They didn't have it written down as a formal thing. That was recorded later in the Talmud. They observed the Shabbat the same way we observe the Shabbat. They put on tefillin the same way we put on tefillin. They used the lulav and the etrog exactly like we do. They had the mezuzah like we do. All of that. None of that is written in the Torah anywhere. There's not a single mitzvah in the Torah. You can choose whatever mitzvah you want. There's not a single mitzvah in the Torah that it says how to perform the mitzvah. It says about it, like mezuzah. You should write uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha al bisharecha. You should write the mezuzah. What should you write? doesn't say what to write, where to put it, how to put it, when to put it, why. It doesn't say anything.
So how do we know? And everybody.
All of that is from the oral tradition. That God told Moses, let me tell you what a mezuzah is. Let me tell you how it works. This is how you do it. Eventually, it was written down. But until then, generation to generation, they taught from parent to child and teacher to student.
Another question.
Yes.
So in yesterday's parsha, Moses told them about Shabbat and how to celebrate. Before that, we knew about Shabbat, didn't we? And so why they're questioning it?
Right. So they weren't questioning it. First of all, not everybody knew. Meaning, the knowledge of Torah was known before. Abraham and Sarah, they practiced the mitzvot. They taught it to their son Yitzchak because Ishmael wasn't too interested. So Yitzchak and Rivka continued in that tradition. And Yaakov then continued together with his wives, Rachel and Leah, Bilhah and Zilpah. And then all of their children, all of the 12 children followed in that way. But then let's remember that they were for 200 years in exile in Egypt. And while they were in exile in Egypt, most of them assimilated. They kind of left that way. There was one tribe, the tribe of Levi. They remained committed to the study of Torah and so on. Moshe was a descendant of that tribe, the tribe of Levi. So not everybody knew all the information, and then they were commanded. It's different. Even though it was before the Torah was given, at that stop that we read about in the parasha yesterday, God already began to command them certain of the mitzvot, and one of them was the laws of Shabbat. Even though in the Ten Commandments he said it again, but that was already commanded upon them.
Is that why a Levi or a Cohen goes to reads first Leah?
It's not why, but yes, it's that
day.
tribe. It's not why, but yeah, there's another.
There's only like 20% of the Jews left Egypt. Many stayed.
Yes, 80% didn't make it out. Yes. Okay, so back to the study of Torah. So we want to know if Tanya is part of Torah. The Tanya is part of Torah. It's a continuation of the development of the studies of Kabbalah and other. Tanya is not just based on Kabbalah; it's also based on Midrash and Talmud. So any continued development of knowledge of Torah, whether it's a commentary, whether it's an explanation, or whatever it may be, that is communicated or is designed based on the principles, that God gave to Moshe, is considered part of Torah. Even though technically Moshe may have not studied that exact thing, but it's a continuation from Moshe.
How do you know what to learn? Like you said, you have Tanya, you have Gemara, you have Zohar, you have this.
So you try to learn a little bit of everything.
Should we learn it all eventually? Should we know it all? Or
It's impossible to learn everything.
Like all books are basically the same thing in different words or different, every parshan is different,
Correct. So you can't.
So
it's
how do I know
impossible.
which
It says the Torah is rechava mini yam. What does it say? It was a pasuk. That it's wider than the sea and broader than the sky. Meaning it's impossible to study the whole Torah.
Yeah.
But certainly,
what's the difference in the books of the parshanot? Or
there's another interpretation, another layer. It says shivim panim la Torah. The 7 facets. Not just 7 ways to explain something. 70. There's every part of Torah has so many layers and layers and layers. And of course, you can always learn and uncover more things. There's also an aspect of lilmod b'makom shelibo chafetz, that you should learn where your heart kind of draws you to it. Because if you have a personal excitement about a certain aspect of Torah, then focus on that. You'll be more motivated for it.
So my question is if the Kabbalah and the Zohar and all these books, the Tanya, is it the same thing in different approaches, or it's different parts of...
In one way, everything is the same because everything is Torah. But on the other hand, it's a different delivery. It's a different...
About this side of the Torah,
right, or different... certain doesn't address certain things, only address certain parts.
So how do I know which one?
What?
So how do I know which one?
What do you mean?
Like you do the Tanya, and there is the Kabbalah, and there is the Zohar, and there is the Mishnah, and Gemara, and I don't know, so many.
Right.
How do I know which one?
Which one is what? What do you mean by which one?
To learn, to explore.
So, again, you follow A, what's available, B, what you feel that you have a desire to connect with, and ultimately, it's good to be able to have at least a little bit of everything so that you can, for example, if you say, my heart pulls me to Kabbalah, let's say, to Zohar. But if you never study Tanya, if you never study Talmud, you don't know. Maybe your heart would pull you to that too. You never tried it. Yeah. So it's important to try to at least open yourself to, a little bit of everything, so you could at least have a basic knowledge as much as you can.
But there's not like a better or worse.
No, it's all Torah. It's all God's wisdom. There's no good and bad. It's all good. Yeah. There is formal systems, like if somebody wants to, devote themselves to the study of Torah, how to divide your time. A certain percentage of time you should focus on the written part of Torah, a certain percentage on the Talmud, a certain percentage on the Kabbalah, and the Midrash, and so on. But if you're not ready to become a fully devoted Torah student, then it's what's important. What the best thing to do is to dedicate some time, whatever time you have. Let's say you're going to dedicate 15 minutes a day. So dedicate some of those minutes to be for studying the written Torah, the Torah Shebichtav. You can study according to the Parshat HaShavua. That's the easiest way to follow, because then, over the year you go through the whole 5 books of Moses. So study a little bit of that. And then some of the time for other parts that are in the oral Torah, whether it's the Mishnah, whether it's the Talmud, whether it's the Kabbalah, the Medrash, or the Zohar. You go where your heart pulls you, and then from there, you can develop a little more.
I mean, Jews love structure. I'm assuming that there is a certain structure, like growing up in yeshiva and in school, you learn this and then this and then this.
Of course,
it's like building blocks, right?
Of course.
Like everything else.
The Zohar is the most Some people can read it and go crazy because they don't even understand it, and there's so many deep and. Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of myths about the Zohar.
People like to make nobody can read it. Only special people.
People like to make a fad. People like to make a fad out of things, but it's part. You don't need no special powers. It's part of Torah.
You can't really understand it unless you're a very high spiritual level, to understand it.
I can say that about any part of Torah. You can't really understand that because it's God's wisdom.
Yeah.
Yes, the Zohar is written in a more abstract manner. Okay. So it's concepts that you may be less familiar with, but if you learn those concepts, you can understand it. Yeah. It's not
that top.
It's not a top.
If somebody comes and say, "Oh, I read the Zohar," no, you didn't.
First of all, it's very hard to read it because it's in Aramaic. So if you don't speak Aramaic, it's even though it's been translated, but then you have to know if it's accurate or not. Anyways. Okay, I want to conclude with one more point back to the chapter 5 of Tanya that I think is very important as well in tying back together the idea that we said. So just to kind of go back to that point, we're talking about the impact that the knowledge of studying a Torah has on our mind. It causes such a deep connection with God in the form of, we're saying, like ingesting food. It's like you absorb it, it becomes part of your system. And that is a very powerful connection. But there's another aspect here as well, that it really transforms us as physical, finite human beings. And that is that once our brains our physical brain, our physical mind, begins to absorb more and more of God's wisdom, in addition to the deep connection that we achieve with God through that, our physical brain starts to operate or starts to perceive reality through the context of God's view. You ever heard people say, "Oh, I wish I can know why God's doing something," or what's God thinking? How could you know what God is? God's infinite. You don't know. So we can't know God, of course not, and we can't understand God. But what we could do is through the study of Torah, we begin to see the world, we begin to see our physical reality through the perspective, through the angle of God's view. And that has a tremendous effect on how we interact and engage with the world in every aspect. So, in addition to the basic benefit that we said right at the start, that we study Torah to know what to do, like any other knowledge, here it's not just to know what to do, but we study Torah to begin to see reality from God's view, not from the human view. And that is very, very powerful. It's in a way becoming understanding God in some way. You can never fully understand God, but you begin to view things in a different way, in a different angle. So, essentially, what this means in a practical sense, and I want to emphasize this because I think it's important. Oftentimes, people think of Torah study or Torah education as, okay, there's nice stories in the Bible, nice stories in the Torah. We have to know, it's our ancestors. We have to know about Abraham and Sarah. And we have to know about the Jews in Egypt. And we have to know about Moses. And we have to know about Joshua. These are important stories of our history. The Americans study about George Washington, whatever. So we Jews, we have to study about this. We have to know that that's where we come from. That's true. But it's so much more than that. Torah education is not just about knowing where we come from. It's not just about knowing what we Jews do, but it's about transforming the way we perceive reality. We all know that the way we live our life and the way we react to situations that we experience in our life, it all has to do with perception. You can have two people experience the exact same situation. One will react in one way, and one will react in another way, and oftentimes it can be opposites. How could it be? They both experience the same thing. What's different? It's their perspective. Because of one's perspective, they reacted in a certain way, and another one, because of their perspective, reacted in an entirely different way. So the Torah affects us to perceive reality in a godly way. And because we see the world from God's point of view, we begin to react to our experiences. I'm talking about our regular day-to-day experiences. When somebody cuts you off on the street, or when you go grocery shopping and the item ran out, or whatever it may be that you're going through, you begin to react to them differently because you've now been affected by perception. That your perception of reality is from God's point of view. Isn't that a big thing today in social media? POV, right? Right, Mickey? Am I on it? So you want to get God's POV? Study Torah. That's how it works, right? And that is so powerful. So why am I emphasizing this? Because most of you here today you're here because you're bringing your children to study in the Hebrew school, where you're engaging yourself in the study of Torah. And you may wonder, obviously, if you're doing it, you know that it's important. And, you don't have to preach to the choir, as they say. But I want to further emphasize, because I believe that it's more important than you may even realize how important it is. Because these ideas and these opportunities, and obviously it's never enough. Like you're asking, what should I study? More, right? It's never enough. And the more we expose ourselves, our children, our families to the study of Torah, it's not just about learning about the holidays, and now we know the song, what to sing, for Pesach. It's beautiful, but that's not. It's much more than that. It begins to affect, to transform the way we perceive reality. And you wonder sometimes, why do people go to yeshiva or to a women's academy to study? To spend full days studying Torah. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. Come on, go get yourself a degree and be useful in society. What are you accomplishing? Because when we study Torah in such a deep way and you dedicate that much time, it completely transforms your perspective. And whatever you're going to do after that in your life is going to be in a different way. It's going to be in a completely different manner. And you're going to see the tangible benefits of that in the physical results of your life, whether it's in your business, whether it's in your relationship, whether it's in how you interact with other people, how you feel, your emotional well-being, your mental well-being, everything is transformed, is affected by being influenced from God's POV, from God's point of view. And that is very, very powerful. So in addition to the connection with God, which is the deepest possible than any mitzvah, through Torah study, it really transforms the person. And I'm talking about here not just spiritually, practical, physical transformation. Okay, I'll start with something else. That was also connected to what we said. So he's giving an example here of somebody who is going to study just something in the Torah that has to do with a specific detail of a certain law regarding a certain aspect of Torah. Say we're talking about matters of civil dispute between one person and another. Say, I don't need to study this. I'm not in any lawsuit with anyone, so it's not relevant to me. So he says, Derech Mashal, by way of illustration. When you are in the process of analyzing and fully mastering a ruling of the Mishnah or Talmud, your intellect grasps and engulfs that idea, and yet at the same time, your mind is absorbed in it and it's captivated by it. So he says, now this ruling of the Talmud represents the wisdom and will of the Blessed Holy One of God. That it arose in his will that the final ruling would be when, for example, Reuven will present a particular legal argument and Shimon a certain counter-argument, and the ruling will be such. So even though this argument is not relevant to me, it has nothing to do, the fact is that this is God's will, and that's his idea, that if this argument presents, this is the ruling. So when you understand that, you're connecting with God's mind. So he goes so far to say, even if this scenario never came to pass and never will, maybe not only I don't have this argument, maybe it never will happen. Doesn't matter. And there will be never an actual litigation involving these particular legal arguments and claims. Nevertheless, since it arose in the will and wisdom of the Blessed Holy One, what the final ruling would be if one person would present a certain legal argument and another person a corresponding counter-argument, it follows that when you understand this ruling with your mind, as the laws prescribed by the Mishnah, the Talmud, or later authorities, you thereby understand, grasp, and engulf with your mind the wisdom and will of the Blessed Holy One. So that's what happened. When you study this, what I need to know? You just connected with God's point of view. You just connected with God's perspective. And at that moment, your mind became completely one with God. And as we mentioned before, the second additional benefit to that, you've now been transformed. Your perspective is now impacted because of that. And you're going to see reality differently.
So this connection that we get to God when we do a mitzvah, right? Or this extra connection that comes when we do Torah study. Does that last indefinitely, or does it go away after a certain amount of time?
It's eternal. It's eternal. And that's one of the big differences between any other, in fact, the commercial you watched, even though it can stay in your brain well beyond the time they even remember it, it's not eternal. Eventually, because it doesn't have a spiritual power of infinite. But the connection with God through the Torah that you study, even if it's one time, it stays with you forever. And obviously, it can become covered and buried, and you may not recognize the benefits of it as much, but it stays with you and it's there. And you never know, at some point in your life, it can come out again and help you and benefit.
Even if you forget it.
Even if you forget it, it's still there. It's like the data's imprinted on the hard drive, and you can't delete it. That's it. It's on there.